I smiled the exact moment my cousin Derek announced he was taking over Uncle Jim's antique business. Just smiled. That's when his wife Lauren backhanded me across the face in front of 70 people at what was supposed to be my uncle's retirement celebration. She didn't know the two men in dark suits standing by the Tiffany lamps were IRS agents. Neither did Derek. But I did. Let me back up 6 months, to the day I knew something was terribly wrong. Uncle Jim called me on a Tuesday afternoon, which wasn't unusual. What was unusual was that he called me 3 times in an hour, asking the same question each time. "Sweetheart, did you pick up the Morrison estate pieces?" I had picked them up. I told him twice. The third time, he asked, his voice cracked with confusion, and I heard something I'd never heard from the man who raised me after my parents died. Fear. Parkinson's disease doesn't just steal your movement. It can steal your mind, too. Uncle Jim had been diagnosed 2 years earlier, and while the tremors were manageable with medication, the cognitive symptoms were getting worse. He forgot conversations, lost track of inventory, couldn't remember if he'd paid invoices or deposited checks. I started spending more time at Hartley & Sons Antiques, the shop on Northwest 23rd that Uncle Jim had built from nothing over 40 years. That's when I noticed Derek was suddenly very interested in helping. My cousin Derek had spent our entire childhood telling anyone who'd listen that antiques were old people garbage. He'd borrowed money from Uncle Jim twice, once for a revolutionary cryptocurrency venture, once for a sports bar franchise, and never paid back a dime. He'd missed every family Christmas for 5 years running. But now, with Uncle Jim's mind starting to slip, Derek was there every single day, arm around our uncle's shoulders, talking about securing the legacy and family responsibility. His wife, Lauren, a former real estate agent who'd lost her license for some undisclosed ethical violation, was suddenly fascinated by 19th century furniture valuations. They made me uneasy, but Uncle Jim seemed happy to have family around. "Derek's really stepping up," he told me one evening, his hand shaking as he tried to lock the shop's front door. "Says he wants to learn the business, wants to make me proud." I wanted to believe it. God, I wanted to believe my cousin had finally grown up. Then I found the invoice. I was organizing Uncle Jim's office. He'd started having trouble filing paperwork, and bills were piling up when I saw a receipt for a Georgian mahogany desk we'd sold 2 months prior. The client had paid $18,000, but the amount deposited into the business account was only $9,000. The receipt had been altered. Badly. White out and a different pen, like someone thought Uncle Jim wouldn't notice or couldn't remember the original price. I checked the sales log. 3 more items in the past month showed the same pattern. A Chippendale mirror, sold for $7,500, deposited $4,000. A pair of Ming Dynasty vases, sold for $22,000, deposited $11,000. A Victorian writing desk, sold for $5,200, deposited $2,800. Someone was pocketing the difference, and Uncle Jim, with his deteriorating memory, had no idea he was being robbed. I could have confronted Derek right then. Part of me wanted to grab him by his expensive collar and throw him through the shop window. But I'd learned something from Uncle Jim over the years. Patience pays more than impulse. Some antiques appreciate slowly. Some revenge does too. So instead, I started documenting everything. I installed small security cameras in the shop, the kind that look like smoke detectors. I told Uncle Jim they were for insurance purposes, which made him happy because he couldn't remember if we had cameras already. I didn't tell him they also had audio. I created a separate spreadsheet tracking every sale, every deposit, every discrepancy. I made copies of altered invoices and photographed the originals before Derek could help Uncle Jim with the filing. I watched. I waited. And I smiled at family dinners when Derek talked about how well the shop was doing, how proud he was to be helping Uncle Jim during this difficult transition. The evidence piled up like inventory. Derek had convinced Uncle Jim to make him a co-signer on the business account just in case something happens and you need help accessing funds. 3 days later, $15,000 moved from the business account to a personal account in Derek's name. The memo line said loan repayment, but there was no record of the business ever loaning Derek money. Lauren started coming in when Uncle Jim wasn't there, taking photos of high-value items with her phone. I found her once in the back room, photographing the authentication certificates for a collection of Art Deco jewelry. When I asked what she was doing, She smiled that slick realtor smile and said she was just learning about estate valuation. 2 weeks later, those same pieces of jewelry appeared in an online auction, not through our shop, through a private seller account registered to an LLC called Heritage Estate Solutions. I looked up the LLC. Derek and Lauren were listed as managing members. They were stealing my uncle's inventory, selling it themselves, and pocketing the full amount. But I didn't confront them. I kept documenting, because if I'd learned anything from years of watching Uncle Jim authenticate forgeries, it was this. You need overwhelming evidence before you make an accusation. I also did something else. I called my law school roommate, Jennifer, who'd gone to work for the IRS Criminal Investigation Division in Seattle. I didn't tell her who I was calling about. I just asked, hypothetically, what kind of evidence would be needed to investigate financial fraud against an elderly person. She told me everything I needed to know. Then Uncle Jim's condition got worse. He started having trouble recognizing regular customers. He'd forget which items he'd already sold and would try to sell them again. One morning, I found him in the shop at 4 a.m., trying to open the safe because he couldn't remember if he'd locked it. He cried in my arms, this strong man who'd taught me everything about resilience and integrity, and whispered, "I'm losing myself, sweetheart. I can feel it slipping away." That's when Derek made his move. He convinced Uncle Jim to sign a partnership agreement papers that Derek said would protect the business and ensure smooth operations as Uncle Jim's health declined. Uncle Jim's hands shook so badly he could barely hold the pen. Derek guided his hand through the signature line, saying soothing things about family and legacy. I saw the papers later, when Derek left them on the desk. It wasn't a partnership agreement. It was a transfer of ownership. Effective immediately, Derek and Lauren owned 60% of Hartley & Sons Antiques. Uncle Jim retained 40%, but all business decisions required majority approval, which meant Derek could do whatever he wanted. The next day, Derek announced that Uncle Jim was retiring and that he and Lauren would be taking over operations. There would be a celebration, a retirement party where Uncle Jim could say goodbye to the customers and dealers he'd worked with for decades. They'd host it at the shop, with wine and appetizers, and Derek would formally announce the transition. I knew what it really was. A victory lap. Derek was going to parade his win in front of everyone, cement his position as the new owner, and watch Uncle Jim fade into irrelevance. But Derek didn't know I'd been busy too. I'd spent 6 months gathering evidence. Security camera footage showing Derek altering invoices, pocketing cash from sales, loading merchandise into his truck late at night. Bank statements showing $87,000 moved from the business account to Derek's personal accounts. Screenshots of the Heritage Estate Solutions auction site selling Uncle Jim's inventory. Emails between Derek and Lauren discussing which pieces to take next and how much they could get for them. I'd also had Uncle Jim evaluated by 3 different neurologists. All 3 confirmed he had Parkinson's disease with cognitive impairment. More importantly, all 3 documented that he lacked the mental capacity to enter into complex business agreements, meaning the partnership agreement Derek had pushed through was legally void, and I'd sent everything to Jennifer at the IRS. Financial fraud, elder abuse, tax evasion because Derek hadn't reported any of the stolen income. The criminal penalties alone could mean 5 to 10 years in federal prison. Jennifer told me the investigation would take time, but she assigned 2 agents to start building a case. They'd attend the retirement party as regular guests, observe Derek's behavior, and potentially conduct interviews if they saw anything worth pursuing. "Don't do anything," Jennifer warned me. "Let them incriminate themselves. People like this always do." So I waited for Derek's celebration. I helped Lauren arrange the catering, smiled when she talked about redesigning the shop's image, and said nothing when Derek practiced his speech about honoring Uncle Jim's legacy while bringing the business into the modern era. The party was on a Saturday afternoon in late September. 70 people filled the shop, longtime customers, estate dealers, auction house representatives, people who'd known Uncle Jim for decades. Derek had rented a podium and a microphone. Lauren wore a dress that probably cost more than most of the furniture in the shop. Uncle Jim sat in a wingback chair near the window, hands trembling, looking confused about why all these people were in his shop. I stood next to him, holding his hand. Derek took the microphone and launched into his speech. He talked about family values and honoring traditions and guiding the business forward during challenging times. He thanked Uncle Jim for building something so special and said he was humbled to carry the torch forward. Then he said it. I'm excited to announce that as of today, I'm officially taking over as majority owner and operator of Hartley & Sons Antiques. Lauren and I are committed to preserving everything Uncle Jim built while expanding into new markets and opportunities. That's when I smiled. I couldn't help it. 6 months of watching Derek steal from a sick old man. 6 months of biting my tongue and documenting every crime. 6 months of knowing this moment was coming. It all hit me at once. And I smiled. Lauren saw it first. Her eyes locked on mine from across the room, and I watched her face shift from triumph to rage in half a second. She stormed over, grabbed my arm, and hissed, "You think this is funny? You think you can smirk while your betters take what they've earned?" "I didn't earn anything," I said quietly. "Exactly," she spat. "You're just the charity case he took in. You have no claim to any of this." She pulled back her hand and slapped me hard enough that my head snapped to the side. The room went silent. Uncle Jim tried to stand up, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. Derek rushed over, not to defend me, but to grab Lauren's arm and pull her back. "Jesus, Lauren, not here." I touched my cheek, looked at the shocked faces of 70 witnesses, and smiled wider. "You're absolutely right," I said. "I don't have any claim. But the IRS might." I pointed to the 2 men in dark suits who'd been standing quietly near a collection of Tiffany lamps for the past 20 minutes. They held up their badges. "Derek Hartley," the taller agent said. "Lauren Hartley? We're Special Agents Morrison and Chen from IRS Criminal Investigation. We'd like to ask you some questions about your business activities and income reporting over the past 6 months." Derek's face went white. Lauren's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. "We can do this here," Agent Morrison continued, "or you can come with us to the field office. Your choice." The room erupted. Customers started whispering. An estate dealer I'd known for years caught my eye and nodded slowly, like pieces were clicking into place. Derek found his voice. "This is insane. I don't know what she told you, but—" "We have video evidence," Agent Chen said calmly, pulling out a tablet. "Would you like to see footage from August 14th, when you sold a Chippendale mirror for $7,500 and deposited $4,000? Or maybe September 3rd, when you transferred $15,000 from the business account to your personal account with a falsified loan repayment memo?" Lauren grabbed Derek's arm. "Don't say anything. Don't say a single word." But Derek, like all arrogant men who think they're smarter than everyone else, couldn't help himself. "Those were legitimate business expenses," he stammered. "I was helping Uncle Jim. He couldn't manage the accounts anymore, and I was protecting the assets. By selling them through a separate LLC and keeping the proceeds?" Agent Morrison asked. "That's an interesting definition of protection." "We have documentation," Agent Chen added, showing $87,000 in unreported income, altered invoices, and what appears to be financial exploitation of an elderly person with diminished capacity. "We also have testimony from 3 neurologists stating that Mr. James Hartley lacked the mental capacity to enter into the ownership transfer agreement you executed last month." Derek's lawyer instinct finally kicked in. "We're not saying anything without an attorney." "That's your right," Agent Morrison said, "but we'll need you to come with us. We have a warrant for your financial records, and we'd like to conduct a formal interview." They weren't arrested that day. White-collar crimes move slowly, but they were escorted out of the shop in front of everyone. Lauren was crying. Derek kept saying it was all a misunderstanding, that I'd manipulated the situation, that Uncle Jim would confirm everything was legitimate. Uncle Jim, still sitting in his wingback chair, looked at me with clearer eyes than I'd seen in months and whispered, "Did we get them, sweetheart?" "Yeah, Uncle Jim," I said, kneeling beside him. "We got them." The investigation took 4 months. In that time, I had the ownership transfer agreement voided through probate court based on the medical testimony. The business reverted to Uncle Jim's sole ownership, and I was appointed as his legal guardian with power of attorney for all business decisions. The IRS auditors went through every transaction Derek had touched. They found more than I had: shell companies, fake vendors, inflated expense reports. The total came to $140,000 in stolen funds. Derek and Lauren were indicted on 8 counts of wire fraud, 3 counts of elder financial abuse, and 12 counts of tax evasion. They took a plea deal to avoid trial. Derek got 4 years in federal prison and 5 years probation. Lauren got 2 years and 3 years probation. They were also ordered to pay full restitution $140,000 plus interest and permanently barred from serving as fiduciaries for any elderly or vulnerable persons. Derek's parents, my aunt and uncle, stopped speaking to me. They said I'd destroyed their son's life over a misunderstanding. I sent them copies of the court documents and security camera footage. They never responded. But here's the thing about family. Sometimes the people who share your blood aren't really your family, and sometimes the people who aren't blood become everything. Uncle Jim lived for another 2 years after Derek's sentencing. His Parkinson's progressed, and eventually he needed full-time care, but his mind cleared up once the stress of Derek's presence was gone. We spent those 2 years running the shop together, me handling the transactions and logistics, him teaching me everything he knew about authentication, provenance, and the stories behind every piece. On good days, he'd sit in the shop and tell customers about the history of a piece or the quirk of a particular craftsman. On bad days, I'd sit with him and read auction catalogs while he nodded off in his chair. He passed away peacefully in his sleep on a Thursday morning, in the upstairs apartment above the shop where he'd lived for 40 years. I was there. I'm glad I was there. He left everything to me. The shop, the inventory, the building, his personal collection. Everything. But more than that, he left me a letter. I found it in the safe, in an envelope with my name written in his shaky handwriting. Sweetheart, it read, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I hope you know how proud I am of you. Not because you saved my business or caught Derek or did any of those brave things, though I'm proud of that too. I'm proud because you did what I taught you. You were patient, you gathered your evidence, and you acted with integrity even when it would have been easier to just walk away. You're more my daughter than my niece, and you always have been. This shop, this legacy, it was always meant to be yours. Build something beautiful with it. And remember, the best antiques aren't just old, they're resilient. They survive because they were built to last, built with care, built by people who gave a damn. Be like that. Love, Uncle Jim. I cried for 3 hours after reading that letter. The shop is still open. Hartley & Sons Antiques, though I've thought about changing it to Hartley & Niece, or just Hartley's. I kept Uncle Jim's desk in the office, and his favorite magnifying glass, and the pocket watch he carried for 50 years. Sometimes customers who knew him will come in and tell stories about deals they made or pieces they bought, and I'll smile and add details, he told me. Derek got out of federal prison last year. I heard through the family grapevine that he's working as a manager at a storage facility in Beaverton. Lauren left him while he was in prison. Last I heard, she moved to Arizona. They never paid back the restitution. The court garnishes Derek's wages, but at $200 a month, it'll take him decades to pay back what he stole. I don't care about the money. I never did. I cared about the principle. I cared about protecting someone I loved from people who saw his vulnerability as an opportunity. Some people think I'm bitter, that I should forgive and move on. Let bygones be bygones. Remember that Derek is still family. But here's what I learned from Uncle Jim. Some things are worth more than family harmony. Integrity, justice, protecting the people who can't protect themselves. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is make sure the people who hurt your loved ones face consequences. I don't regret any of it. Not the months of evidence gathering, not the IRS investigation, not watching Derek get led away in front of 70 witnesses. I smiled that day because I knew what was coming. I smiled because 6 months of patience and documentation and careful planning were about to pay off. I smiled because sometimes the people who underestimate you are the easiest to catch. And I'd smile again. Uncle Jim taught me that some antiques are valuable because they're rare. But the most valuable ones are the ones that tell a story about who owned them, who cherished them, who fought to preserve them. This shop tells a story now, not just about antiques, but about an old man who built something beautiful and a young woman who refused to let anyone steal it. Every time I unlock the door in the morning, I see Uncle Jim's name on the sign, and every time someone asks me about the history of the shop, I tell them the truth. It was built by someone who believed that things worth having are worth protecting, and that family isn't just about blood, It's about who shows up, who stays, and who has your back when everything is falling apart. Derek never understood that. He thought family was about what you could take. He learned the hard way that sometimes the people you underestimate are the ones who bring you down. And that smile he tried to wipe off my face? It was never about him. It was about knowing that justice, like a good antique, sometimes takes time to appreciate and value. But it's always worth the wait.